Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are live on Facebook as well. So hello to everybody that's watching on there. We're going to try to monitor those comments as well. I really appreciate you guys joining. We're going to wait just a little bit. There's about 50 people that registered, or over 50 people that registered. And I'm sure, and I apologize for the amount of emails that went out on this. I think there's enough reminders about this one, so I'll try to fix that in the future. That was our first time using Luma to sign everybody up. So appreciate you guys for taking the time with that. And glad you're here. So are we going to get started? We got 8:03. We're going to get started. I think people are just keeping their video cameras off because they could still be eating dinner. Anyway, I want to thank you everybody for coming out to this event. It's been a while since Irismar and I have put on an evening.
So Paul, it's been a while.
So hopefully you find some benefit in this. It's nearly our 1-year anniversary since we held our first Zoom call in an evening like this. And what did we host? What did we do?
It was a manifestation call.
Oh yeah. So that was our first one. We had an awesome turnout for that, and our hosts were
we had great hosts and now great friends, Melanie Robinson, Fern Gauthier, Tanis Benz, Elaine Thompson. They sort of all came in and just shared that positivity and that perspective that has kept us going through 2023. So yeah. 2022 and into 2023. So I'm getting ahead of myself.
They totally helped with our real estate investing growth in terms of mindset and being positive and manifesting. We've also hosted some other Zoom calls on that, so we're very honored to have them in our lives, and honored that you guys have been around supporting us as well. So I appreciate that. Now, with the awesomeness like that we've had, Irismar and I, with having amazing friends, we've been hosting a Monday morning show now for almost a year.
Just Rise and Shine.
Rise and Shine, yes. So it's been, we're very fortunate. We have a new guest every Monday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you don't watch those already, I'll put the link in the chat so you can sign up to those and get the reminders for those. We only broadcasted those in the Keyspire Inner Circle. So for those of you that are not in the Inner Circle, just in our past 3 or 4 episodes, we've been broadcasting them on our personal Facebook page so that we can reach a larger audience and spread some of the information that our amazing guests have and share that information with the community.
It's bringing us to tonight's.
Well, almost. Hold on a second. So I wrote down some things.
Yes,
okay.
Sorry, dear.
I'm just joking. Meetups. So next week, Mike Seal, I saw, is on the call. Mike's not in the country right now, but we're honored to have him join the call. We are having a real estate investor meetup next week. It's going to be, we don't know where yet, but it's Thursday night, which is the 22nd.
The 22nd.
And so send me a message, or send Irismar a message, and we'll get you the details for that and get you all hooked up. Now, these meetups we've talked about over and over again. They've been an integral part of our growth and development in our REI journey. And I mean, I think you guys should always try to meet them, go to meetups, meet people. It only takes one partner to make yourself better. And we've seen people that were strangers at these meetups before, and now they're knocking it out of the ballpark. So try to go to these meetups, try to come on to these types of Zoom calls, turn your cameras on. As you know, Judy Perret, one of the coaches in Keyspire, says, if nobody knows you, nobody's going to be doing business with you when it comes to the time that you're going to need a helping hand or a partner up, or borrow some money or something like that. So try to join these meetups and keep your cameras on when you're on Zoom calls and all that sort of stuff. Finally, I just want to say that none of us are experts of any of the topics that we discuss. We try to do our own due diligence and review our information. However, we want to encourage everyone to seek the advice of qualified professionals and to do your own due diligence when reviewing deals and all that sort of stuff. So Huh.
For tonight, we have a great friend who also actually we ended up meeting her at a meetup. So how life cycles goes around. Rachel Holden, welcome tonight. She's a real estate investor that started her journey with single family homes. Then she started investing in the US, came back to Canada and started her journey with Coach Homes and moving to development land and resorts. Incredible. Welcome. We couldn't have someone more to come and help us and give us highlight and build 23.
So hello, everybody. It's
Hello.
I see some new faces, some new names, and some people that that I've worked with and have had the pleasure of knowing. So I was really excited with the opportunity to come and talk to everybody today about my take on it is coach houses, but Bill 23 essentially, and kind of what that means. Are most of you guys from Ontario, or are there people from outside of Ontario here that are looking to possibly kind of come back or expand into the market?
Yeah, I looked at most of the names that were coming in, and I believe almost everybody is in
Everybody.
Ontario. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. So I have a PowerPoint presentation for you. It's like less than 20 slides. It's about a conversation. Like, let's discuss this and talk about all the sort of like nuance points. This is a huge bill, so we're not going to. Whoop! I'm talking to myself. My goodness.
No,
So
it's us.
you know, we're not going to get into everything, but I think that you'll be much more confident when you leave this hour with Bill 23 and sort of what the possibilities might be for you over the next few years. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me see. It's been a long time since I've see hour with Bill 23 and sort of what the possibilities might be. There we go. Stop that. Okay. So let me just move you guys over here so that I can see what's going on. All right. So More Homes Built Faster Act. I think that everybody would kind of agree that this Bill 23 kind of came out of nowhere and then moved very, very quickly. I'm not a watcher of legislation, but I can't believe how quickly it moved and got passed. Not something that I've ever seen before. So I have here just a very quick sort of introduction slide for myself. Some of you may know me. Some of you may know me because of Club Muskoka. So I'm the co-owner of Club Muskoka with Natasha and Walter. And that's a project that we've been working on for almost the last 6 months now. We've been pretty out there and pretty vocal. The other project that is pretty large that you may know me from is the Capstone 6, which is the Manchester redevelopment, which was a land assembly in Calgary that we are working on to put that land assembly together and then get it rezoned from small residential buildings into a large apartment building. My original company was Uplift Ventures, and that is the company under which I've been doing the coach houses. And then I've recently opened up Carradine Management. So that is sort of providing management services to all of those other corporations. So there you go. And because there's a few different corporations, I wasn't sure what branding to use and colors and logos. So I just went with a PowerPoint template that was already there. Figured that would be a little bit easier. So first of all, I had to make sort of assumptions about who we were going to be talking to today. So who would benefit from this presentation? So I think that there's a couple of different ways to look at things. One is you're a real estate investor, you currently own property in Ontario, and you're like, what can I do? How can this help me? Another one is you're a passive investigator, you want to mitigate risk, you want appreciation, you want cash flow, and you have access to capital. So that's somebody, who has the funds to do some new construction, that type of thing. You want to invest in Ontario, but historically there's been nothing good here. So you're like, tell me how it's changed. Tell me why Ontario is back on the map. You're a passive investor, you're looking for a steady stream of income, and maybe you're thinking, how is this going to affect private lending? Who's going to be out there looking for funds? Or You know, I've heard a lot of talking heads talking about Bill 23, but I kind of want to know what it has to do with me. So those are the things that we are going to try to cover today. So let's go back in time. Why it was needed. So Bill 23 has made a big splash, but the original Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice, made a smaller splash. And that bill actually allowed for the construction of coach houses. It was a provincial thing that said each municipality would have to work it into their systems as they were doing their official plans and as they were going through and updating bylaws. So it wasn't a push of like, here's the deadline. So some municipalities very quickly accepted coach house construction. Other municipalities pushed back and wouldn't allow it at all. So the idea was that it would allow you to build by right. So you wouldn't have to go in and get something rezoned. If you owned that property, it was your right to build up to 3 units on that property. So the intent there was to increase rental options in cities where infrastructure already existed. So what they were trying to do was encourage intensification. So what really happened was numerous municipalities sort of said, okay, fine, the province has said that this is something that we have to do. We're going to rubber stamp it. We are going to take a bylaw that was written for garages and we're going to modify it a little bit and allow people to build coach houses. Others said, no, we don't want this in our communities, and we're going to push back on that. So nothing really happened, right? Like we kind of know that it's been a hard process. We know of maybe a few people, we've seen them on social media that have built these, but it hasn't been anything that has really affected systemic change. So the government said, okay, well, that one didn't do what we wanted it to do. So here's the next option, and we're going to be a little stronger in our discussions. So what I think is really interesting is with one stroke of the pen, the Planning Act was changed in a huge way. So here's a little slide saying this one thing can change your life. This one thing can change everything, but with the caveat that what the pen giveth, the pen can taketh away. So with that, what I'm trying to say is this is what the legislation says today. But as I've personally seen now over the last 5 years, legislation can change quickly. And we know that this was brought in very quickly, so these things can change. So
that,
if it's,
I'm sorry, no, but that's important for all of us to know. I mean, like so many people you hear so often that we're afraid of investing in Ontario. It's hard to make the numbers work in some of the major cities. And here we have this, and this might not be around for another 3-ish years or so. It could, a next government can get voted in, and this can be just ripped right apart again. So it's time to start focusing on getting your ducks in order here in order to take advantage of this opportunity.
Definitely. It's not a time to say, okay, well, I'll think about that once the dust settles, because when the dust settles, it may settle in a different position than it is right now. So the next slide here is sort of that one broad stroke that changed everything. So in 2022 of October, development meant the construction or the building of structures on land. Everything was a development. And when everything is a development, every law and bylaw that relates to developments relate to everything. They've now changed the definition of what a development is. So now a development does not include the construction or placing of buildings for residential purposes on parcels of land that will contain no more than 10 units. Suddenly, a large portion of the Planning Act no longer applies to single-family homes, no longer applies to anything up to a 9-plex. So now, simply by changing the definition of one word in the Planning Act, you can start to like cross off paragraphs. Those paragraphs are no longer anything that you have to worry about. And this will save time, it will save money, it will save complexity. It's really where the game changer is. So now we say the provincial government has made it easier for you to essentially house hack. So you can add that legal basement suite to your dwelling, and you can add that third suite. So, yep, no, go ahead.
Sorry, now in regards to the third suite, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe you can tell me you're going to answer this later on. I don't know the entire presentation, but there was a little bit of confusion in the way for me it was worded, and then the example that was provided by, I believe, the government. And I was under the impression on the way it was worded is you could take a 2-story house and make each level a unit if you were able to separate. I don't know. But what they had was what we understand as a typical duplex in Ontario. It was with a legal basement suite, the upper 2 floors for another tenant, and putting in another unit in the backyard or something like that, a carriage house or laneway house or whatever.
Right.
So I was.
So I do have a slide that is a little bit technical, but essentially it's 3 independent units on a lot, on a residential lot, and then the configuration for those units is up for grabs. So you can build a triplex, a purpose-built triplex, or you can convert a single family home into a suited home. Now, just to be a pain, the language that they use is that it's not a duplex, it's a suited home, because duplexes were not allowed in single family zoned residential areas. So you can have a 2-family home, but it's not a duplex, it's a registered secondary suite. It's, language. So the one caveat though is you still need to follow building code, and building code is what is kind of a pain in the butt, because that is your fire code, that is the square footage that is allowed per room, that is glazed windows, that's fire exits, all of that sort of stuff still applies. So, we're not going to have people take their crawl space and convert it to something because of this law. Everything still needs to go through a permit process, and everything still needs to follow code, which can be a bit frustrating because some of it's very redundant, but that's just how it goes. So you're allowed to build that suite now, and you don't have to go to committee of adjustment. So you don't also have to go to site plan. So what municipalities were doing was they were saying, okay, it's allowed, but as part of your application, you have to do XYZ on these site plans. And then part of that was hiring an arborist to map out the trees on the lot. And then if that tree, you couldn't tear it down if it was over a certain size. And then if it was under a certain size, you could tear it down, but only if it wasn't bird mating season. So they had all of these roadblocks that they were putting in front of people so they can say, yes, we are in alignment with the provincial legislation, but they weren't actually allowing anything to be built because of all these caveats that they put in the way. Now, they can't make you go through site plan anymore. They can't force you down that road, but they still can create setback requirements, create minimum side yard requirements, and those can really limit the amount of construction that you can do on a lot. Because 50 years ago, you could essentially build a house almost up to the edge of the lot, right? Like come to downtown Toronto and there's 2 feet on either side of a home and you have to walk through sideways. Whereas like they won't allow construction like that anymore in a lot of municipalities. So I've been operating in Barrie mostly, and there they took the side yard and they went from 0.9 meters, which is just under 3 feet, to 3 meters, which is 9 feet. So now you're looking at, a residential lot that's say about 50 feet wide. And now you can't build on this 9 feet and you can't build on that 9 feet. So, that's 20 feet gone out of this 50-foot lot. So now the maximum size that you can have is 30 feet wide. So there are ways like that they can throw little wrenches in the plan to make things not as easy or not as marketable for you, essentially. So here's if like let's talk about money. Okay. if a property is revenue neutral as a duplex. So years ago, a single family home, you could rent it out and everything would be okay, like 15 years ago. And then the house hacking of, you know what, we'll put something in the basement and those two units together will bring us cash flow. Then the property values went up so much that that wasn't even cash flowing. That was your break even point, but at least it was covering itself. So now you're looking at a situation where if the duplex is at a break even point and you're putting another unit in the back, and that is a 2-bedroom unit, you are now bringing in $1,800 for that 2-bedroom unit. So you went from being cash flow neutral to cash flow positive $1,800. And the equation is not that simple because there's construction costs and refinance costs and things like that. But you go from very little to generously profitable if you're the one who is doing the construction, right? You know, you have to pay a bit more if there's builders involved and that type of thing. So then, okay, so I have a duplex, I'm going to add this coach house. Well, maybe what I want to do is I want to build a purpose-built triplex. I'm going to buy a lot and I'm going to design a purpose-built triplex so that I'm not doing renovations to, you know, a 70-year-old bungalow. Maybe that's what I want to do. You can do that now. Whereas before there were a lot of areas in many cities where you could not put up a triplex because it wasn't zoned for it. You would have to go into like a multiple residential area that was kind of meant for like mid-rises in order to be able to do something like that.
That's huge. That's a really big deal. Do you see a lot of angry neighbors and like
yeah. So when the More Homes, Better Choices came out, the neighbors really pushed back. There was a lot of NIMBYism. They didn't want the construction. And it was actually laughable, a lot of the reasonings that they were talking about, right? They were like, oh, there's going to be runoff. There's going to be, you know, you're going to block my sunlight. And it's like, but it would be okay if it was a garage. Or you're talking about drainage, but it would be totally okay. And we wouldn't have to go through this process if it was an underground pool, which would also affect drainage. So it was very obvious that they didn't want those sorts in their neighborhood. They didn't want renters. They wanted the large sprawling backyards. And it's really frustrating because people who are investors know everybody would love to have a large backyard. But if that house is worth $1 million, you know, and you split it in two, now two people might have access to that backyard and have a life in a city in a good school zone and all of that type of thing. Like it's just become untenable for the average person to live that life in a major city center.
Right on. Janet just asked a question here. On R1 zoning, can we put a triplex?
Yes.
That's what it's saying.
That's what they're saying. Yeah, is that the municipality can't stop you in a single family zone.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Incredible.
So then you can like think bigger. So anything under 10 units is now exempt from site plan. And I don't know if anybody here has ever been through the site plan process, but it's tedious. So they're asking about trees, they're asking about parking, they're asking about the lighting in the parking lot. They're asking about whether or not the cars have the ability to turn around in the parking lot for a triplex or fourplex. It's a system that was created for large multiplexes, but it was a tool that they forced these smaller units into in order to shut down the development, essentially, right? Or to slow things down.
Wow.
So if you are a passive real estate investor, so this is my caveat to you, and it's also to anybody who's thinking of doing the coach house. The coach house loans would be at least $200,000. It depends on if you're building it yourself or if you are hiring a builder to do it. But this is a new thing. So I have 5 of them now, I think. But trying to get them refinanced is a nightmare, or has been a nightmare, because there was no comparables. They are residential. They don't look at cap rate. It doesn't matter how much money they bring in. It's the residential division of the mortgage that looks at this thing, and they say, what are the comparables? And some of them, what I went through was they came back and said, oh, that's not a house, that's an outbuilding. And
It
I said,
sounds like something you go in the washroom to when you're camping.
well, and they're like, essentially, we're looking at it as if you're on a farm and that's a shed. It's uninsurable and we don't care. It brings no value. It's like, right? Like, $200,000 or $300,000 off the top of the value. So this legislation is going to ensure that that changes. Part of the benefit of getting in early is that you can get properties where these things will fit, where you can construct them, because not everybody's looking for them. But the caveat on the other end is that you may have to have some equity tied up in it for a little while until there are comparables and until there's a marketplace for them within that municipality. Right?
Excellent points,
so, yeah. So, it's it benefits you if possible to make your own market. So you can go in, and if you have the capacity to do it, build 2 or 3 of these, knowing that you're going to sell one to create your comparable, and then refinance the others. Right? So you need them to be in the same marketplace. You need them to be like of similar size, that sort of thing. And you can get the ball rolling that way, but it means that you have to have significant capital and you have to have significant investment in one municipality.
I think there's 36 or so comparables on this call tonight. We can all just make our own market happen.
Yeah, right. It's amazing. So if you have access to capital, where to go? Get a JV partner. If you don't have experience with construction, partner with somebody who's on the ground, who knows what to look for when searching for properties. I use the example that in the city of Aurelia, they were saying that it was fine as long as the property was 50 feet wide. And then when you look at a bunch of their municipal properties, they're actually 49 feet wide. So that was their way of taking those out of the loop. So if you end up with this property, you might still be able to build on it, but you may have to go through additional, problems that you wouldn't have had to if you had just gotten something that was 50 feet. Expect everything to take longer than you would like. And expect that the municipalities don't really know what they're doing. So this is a situation where these municipalities created their own bylaws, had all of their own rules, had the planning department work on them. They went to council, they were voted on, and then the province came in and said, here's your new framework. And so they're just saying, like, we don't know how this impacts us. We need to see how we need to react to this. So when I've talked to a couple of people at the city, and they're just like, my God, like, this is unbelievable. Like 3 years of our work trying to get this before council and having it voted on, and it's been wiped out in a matter of, a week or two. And if the idea of construction and refinance and all of that stuff is a put off to you, then look to see if you can get a recently constructed triplex. So there are some marketplaces that have been doing this since 2019. So the first one that I bought in Barrie was in 2019. Aurelia was, I think, shortly after. So there are some that maybe there was a joint venture partner that started in 2019 that will start entering the market over the next year or two. And those are still cash flowing, especially now since the interest rates have gone up. It's suppressed prices a little bit. So really, I think there's going to be some good deals to be had. And then if you can wait a little while for interest rates to come back down, you're going to have a unit that cash flows $1,000 a month in the province of Ontario, which was unheard of previous to this, right? So if you are a homeowner, if you are a contractor, what are you looking for? So you can no longer fight to not have this in your neighborhood. Now, they had originally said that no third party could go and protest. So
Wow.
what was happening was, like the neighborhood historical tree society could come and say, no, I don't want you to do this. So they were limiting who could comment. Now, admittedly, it went back and forth in the last reading and they changed some of that a little bit. So they gave people a bit more powers, but it's not the same as it used to be. So we know that just because somebody got their roots dug up on their tree 3 years ago and their tree died and it was upsetting, and that they can't stop this sort of stuff. The other thing that you've probably heard people talk about is that property taxes may go up to pay for it all. So one of the big things was the reduction of development fees. And because the municipalities can't charge the same amount that they used to, they're going to have to get that money from somewhere. I think like the conservative line is, we'll just, trim staff, make yourself more lean and everything will be fine. And the other side is saying, we actually have to pay construction workers to put in the sewer lines and that type of thing. So who knows which way it will go. I've heard anything up to like a 50% increase in property taxes across the board to make up for the lack of development charges that they can charge to developers. I don't know, I think we're gonna hear more about it in 2023. And then the contractors are going to be busy and costs will escalate. So right now we're in a little bit of a, I don't want to use the word depression, but like things have slowed down a little bit. We went through COVID, the price of lumber went up 150% in a few months. That cost has started to come back down. Some people are sort of canceling contracts because interest rates have gotten high enough that it doesn't fully make sense. But when this stuff starts, you're going to have a hard time getting somebody. You're going to have a hard time getting somebody to pour your concrete and to know how to properly plumb an entire house, because that's not something that your local emergency plumber does, right? Like they have to have the skill set to be able to do that.
Rachel,
Yeah.
Jeff Wallace just chimed in here. Thanks for joining, Jeff. He's wondering, will the provincial government set the development fees or still the municipality?
So they've actually removed fees.
Yeah, like
for a lot. So let's see. I have some, it's all in the details. So there are a lot of details, right? Like the act is, I think, 73 pages. The act was modified, and then that act refers to other acts and modifies them. So this bill 23 then says, go to the Planning Act and change the word development in the Planning Act to actually mean this, and therefore the entire Planning Act changes in how you interpret things. So I can't go through every single change, and I don't think every single change is going to apply to the people that are listening today, but I do have sort of some heads up here. So it used to be that a lot of municipalities within the planning could stop you from doing things, essentially, right? So now they're saying this additional residential unit framework is as of right. So that is the legal way of saying that if you own this property, they can't stop you from doing it. It's your right. You don't have to go to committee of adjustment. You don't have to ask permission. It's your right to do that. Let me see here. See, so there we go. I'm not good at reading slides. I'm good at just like talking. So that's what this says right here. So as of right is one of the next big ones. So who's the boss? So you've heard probably that the city of Toronto was pissed off. The city of Ottawa was mad. There are a lot of these entities that had created a lot of their own bylaws and a lot of their own development rules, and a lot of those powers have been taken away from them. And there's upper tier municipalities and there's lower tier municipalities. So for instance, like the city of Barrie was in the municipality, like within Simcoe. So Simcoe had to look at the plans for Barrie and for Innisfil and provided this blanket, and they've taken away a lot of those things. So some people in the lower level municipalities are quite happy about this because it allows them to control things in their neighborhood and closer to home. But the broader scale planning that was involved previously would no longer be happening. because they're not looking at the plan as a region, they're looking at the plan as a smaller entity. So that's why you're getting a lot of pushback in the media between municipalities, planning departments and such.
And just to go with what you said on the previous slide there, in terms of contractors are going to be busy, Mike Seals making a comment here about, what our coaches in the real estate investing world have told us time and time again. Mike saying building your team in advance is very important, and having a great general contractor. We've been told get a team. So now is the opportunity to really focus on that.
It's definitely true. And I actually, for some of the work that I did, I was my own GC, and I GC'd from an hour away. And would I do it again? No, I don't think so. I have a team in place. I have somebody who can be a site supervisor. When I do it again, I will do it differently. But I also now know the complete methodology of what comes first when you're building a home. So it depends on what you want to do and what you want to learn and how you want to grow as well, right? Like how you take that on. So say that again, as of right. So here is the actual legal information. So it depends on, how nerdy you are. So no official plan may contain any policy that prohibits the use of 2 residential units in a detached house or a townhouse. Right? So they have to sort of put as many options in. 3 residential units in a detached house or a row house, or and then 1 residential unit in a building or structure ancillary, so not attached to the detached house. So that is the bulk of what is going to affect the small sort of retail investor. The fact that we can now do duplexes, triplexes, and ancillary units on our lots as of right.
To a maximum of 3.
Yes. Yeah. So there had been in the summer an actual report that was created that was discussing how we could accelerate the creation of new housing. And that report had actually suggested as of right 4 units. So they had wanted to go all the way up to a 4-plex, and the government did not accept that and pulled back to the triplex. So there is appetite, who knows in the future what might happen. I can tell you that in Barrie, they specifically wrote it into the bylaw that the ancillary unit could not have more than 1 unit. So what people were trying to do is put a basement in their coach house and then convert the basement to a suite. And so you essentially would then have a 4-plex, right? Except that basement suite was illegal because it wasn't allowed, but it was newly built and built to code, other than the fact that it was illegal to be there. Yeah. Yeah. And you're printing money at that point. Because putting in a basement when you're doing all of these other things from a development standpoint anyway is not particular, it doesn't double the cost. So it was
putting a basement underneath a carriage house. It was a
yes. So
wow.
You
are
would
those,
have
are those basements in the shape of a below ground pool or in ground pool? Or
pretty much. So it would you would have typically a 650 square foot coach house with a 650 square foot basement. Essentially, you would lose a little bit of square footage because you'd have to insulate additionally, and you would lose a little bit of square footage because of a staircase.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But you could still meet your minimum room requirements and that sort of thing. So for an extra $75,000, you would get another unit. So when you're talking about profitability, that extra $75,000 is bringing you in $1,500, where you're not going to get that anywhere else. So yeah, people did it. It wasn't legal, but people did it.
Paul from Windsor, Ontario, got a question here, and I've wondered the same thing because it's amazing. But I hope to see you in Windsor, Paul, on the 22nd. How does Bill 23 impact the reach control of the conservation authorities? Now, Rachel, Irismar and I we went on a property tour with Stephen Jones and his team in Oshawa, Ontario here. And we're looking at this house.
Which was on top of a hill to a creek to the opposite side. And you could not put a second legal unit because of the possibility of flooding that could rise up.
100-year flood plan says this creek that we couldn't see on this driveway because we're standing way up here and the creek's way down here and we're on this roadway, that they wouldn't allow a legal basement apartment there. And that was the conservation authorities.
Yes.
Still.
So it's one of the things where I had I have a couple slides in that sort of like the side conversations, and one of those side conversations is about the conservation authorities. So what they've done is they've instructed them to merge and they've removed some of their powers. Now, if you listen to the media is like, oh my God, they're totally taking the teeth out of the conservation authority, that sort of thing. But what they've done is they've said the only things that you can look at is floodplains and soil. So those things are still going to be accounted for. They may lose a little bit of their teeth because they're being asked to look at different things. So they're not being given the option to look at every single application like they used to be. But they also had the ability before, like if they thought that it was going to create pollution, or there was all of these like smaller things that the average person wouldn't necessarily think about, that they used to be able to comment on, and they're having their scope brought down so that they'll no longer be able to comment on those things. But the two big ones are soil quality and floodplains. And what I was hearing in the media was, oh my God, they're going to build on like silt and everything is going to fall into the creek and from what I can see in the legislation, that's not true. They're still being told to look at the floodplains. They're still being told to look at ground quality. So I don't think it's going to be the massive disaster that people are anticipating that it might be. But there's no doubt, if you're an environmentalist, it's upsetting because you want to see the conservation authority have the most power that they can.
Yeah, I think Walter might be getting his question asked here. But let me throw it out there anyway so you can get a sip of water. My business partner has a 1 acre lot at Weston and King Road. We are looking to develop on it. Can we possibly put up a 9-unit rental building on it?
Yeah, I would say so.
Based on what we're understanding of this, yes, Walter, you should be able to. Of course, as we said, do your due diligence and check with the bylaws.
Because right. So there are still some height restrictions, and there are still parking restrictions. So there are still things that you have to work through. But what was happening was the municipalities were saying there's 3 units. Well, you have to put in 1.5 parking spots per. And they were doing things that they knew purposely would not fit on a residential lot.
Right.
So a lot of those things have been wiped out. But yes, at first blush, I would say that you could do that and the development fees would be gone. And it would reduce the cost of producing that this month from last month by hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the municipality you're working in. Some municipalities, every door costs about $60,000 in development fees. So when you're talking, say, a 10-plex, you're looking at $600,000 in development fees for that 10-plex that have been wiped out. So that's the kind of thing that they're talking about when they're talking about your taxes going up, because, the idea is if you have those 10 units will be paying property taxes, but the construction of all of that infrastructure needs to be done before the property tax bills start going out, right? So it's cart before the horse a little bit with that. Yeah. So where to go to get more information? So if you go to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, they have the whole bill right there, and they have what was changed in the different readings of the bill. I'm going to be honest and say that it's not particularly user friendly. It is the legal documentation. So it's, strike this out and replace it with this, that type of thing. But if you're a person that says, how did this bill start and where did it end up? You can see all of those iterations there. Something that I found really useful, and I think maybe before my real estate life, I worked in business development for law firms on Bay Street. So I always look to them for their newsletters and their articles and their opinion posts, because you're talking about people that make $500, $1,000 an hour, and their job is to read these acts and to provide opinion. So if you can get that information for free from them, for sure do it. So two of the main ones that I like are Denton's and our Osler's. So they have planning departments, they have real estate departments, and they will break it down and say, here's what you can expect and here's what you're looking for. I think it was on Denton's. It was about a 20-25 minute read, but it had a ton of information on it. And it was really, really helpful. Also, municipal websites. So wherever you're thinking of doing something like this, go onto the municipal website. Some of them have already published their responses to Bill 23 of, all the reasons why they don't like it. And then you can always also call the municipal planning departments. Of the few that I've called, sometimes it's hard through to somebody, but they're usually, quite welcoming, quite nice, and are willing to answer as many questions as they can for you. But keep in mind that this is only a few weeks old and they may not actually have the answers to your questions just quite.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. So we're talking about the side conversations now. So these are the things that you guys may have heard of. Changes of historical designations. So it used to be that the municipalities could make up their own rules for what a historic building was, which meant that it could be applied unfairly. So what they're trying to do now is make some of those historical designations more concrete so that they can't use it to stranglehold development. The changes to the conservation authorities, we talked about that. The changes to the green belt and land designation. Those changes, the stuff that you're talking about with like the Oakham Ridges Moraine, they're not actually in this bill. They were just released at the similar time, and people got so cheesed about that I think Bill 23 kind of slid by a little bit faster. So two different things on that one, and then the changes to the development fees and the municipalities' ability to pay for everything. So that's going to be an ongoing one that you're going to hear up until 2023, 2024, when they start looking at taxes and what the mill rate needs to be in order to actually fund all of this future development that is supposed to happen.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So the what to do next, I would say educate yourself as much as you can. One of the courses that I took was the Darcy Marler land development course. So if you're interested in land development and land development strategies, you can learn a bit more about it there. He's a good guy. We call him Papa Bear. He's sort of taken everybody under their wing. If you go out to Calgary, he'll drive you around because he's really excited about land development. The course that he does is like continual enrollment. I think it's Rachel 123. If you use that code, he'll give you a discount. I think it's $50 off. And I believe he's putting the prices up in January. But so, educate yourself on construction management, because if you haven't done a renovation before, if you're not familiar with all of that stuff, learn a bit more about construction before you start, so that you know what you're looking at with different GCs, that type of thing. Educate yourself on land development strategies, because maybe you want to do new construction, maybe you want to do land severance, maybe you want to, right? There's a whole bunch of different options that you could do there. Research municipalities, because some of them are easier to work with than others. And then I trust then verify, because I cannot believe how many places were put up for sale that said possibility of a garden suite in their ad, when I 100% knew that it was not allowed. Okay. And so don't fall for the sales tactics. Always look to see what the actual bylaw is, run it through that screen, and make your decisions from there. And there you go.
Awesome. Very great, very good. Yeah, you got to trust your realtor. I mean, we're fortunate enough to work with a group of realtors, the Referral Network Realty, and they have realtors all across the country. So it's amazing, and I've heard great things about Darcy's course. So congratulations for you to taking a step, and always, I know you're always educating yourself, Rachel, and trying to find every opportunity to grow and expand your mind and the potential.
Yeah, it's a fun course, and the people in the group are good. Everybody has been really friendly and really supportive, and that's actually how the Calgary Manchester redevelopment project came about, was people who met in that course and decided to pool together and do this project. So yeah,
Awesome.
if that's something, he actually also wrote a book about construction, so he's going to be putting a construction module in that course. I'm not a course.
And everybody gets one for free. No, I'm just
I
joking.
know, right? I wish. Yeah, I have nothing to. I have no Kajabi stuff myself. So if that's something that you're interested in, by all means, I'm happy to have some conversations with people. I'm thinking not until January, please. Like I've got some big deliverables for December, and then would like to spend some time with Jam. But yeah, happy to reach out, or do, if you have questions, maybe we do a follow-up to this presentation with specific questions.
Well, do you have time right now? We've got a couple in the chat. If you've got a little bit here. Yeah. So I think we answered Janet Gracie already with so no heritage anymore, habitat and species. So we talked about the heritage buildings and the green space and all that sort of stuff. I think we answered that, Janet. If you have any other questions, please put it in the chat. Zahar was wondering, has anything changed with zoning bylaws, like requirements for parking per unit? We did touch on that: frontage, soft landscaping, percentage, etc.
Yes. Yeah. So some of that stuff has changed. So the designation of what this is really trying to do is get that 1 to 3 units. So there are the broad stroke changes from 1 to 9, but for the 1 to 3, what they've instituted is that you can't ask, or you can't force the hand for more than 1 parking unit per apartment, which is one of those things that the municipalities were trying to skirt. Now, I will fully admit that if you have a 2 or 3 bedroom unit and it is renting for $2,500 a month, and you give them 1 parking spot, you're probably going to have a hard time, because in a lot of those marketplaces, you've got to have 2 people that work full time in order to afford that rent. And if you don't have 2 parking spots, you're going to then get students, you're going to get people who are trying to pool their money together to be able to afford it, and you may end up with student housing or a party house or something like that, when that wasn't really the intention, when you had created it to be something else with your ideal tenant in mind. But yes, it has changed what they can ask of you. And now the differences with green space and all of that. Now, I believe that Ottawa has a hard line on that right now, and I'm not sure how they're going to respond to it with the width of the driveway and how wide the driveway can be compared to the lot. The municipalities that I have dealt with didn't have hard, fast rules about it. It was much more flexible. And then some of the municipalities will actually let you do soft landscaping by way of like gravel or stone. So you're not paving. It doesn't necessarily have to be green space, but it has to be permeable so that it can drain.
Yeah, in terms of green space, Lisa Anisto made a comment here that the parkland dedication requirements have been cut in half. And, there are some things that sound really unfortunate about this bill that,
it's, again, it sounds unfortunate, but if you went from a single family to a suited house, there was no parkland fee. If you added a 3rd unit, they charged $6,000 for a parkland fee.
Oh, wow.
So is having 1 person and their dog in the garage, essentially, that was converted, worth $6,000 in parkland? Why wasn't the family in my basement worth $6,000 for parkland, but the guy in the back was? Right. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. And then if any of you have done larger developments, there's also something called a community benefit. And this is the secret that I didn't know about. And that is essentially a way for the municipality to negotiate with the developer for the developer to pay for density. So I want to build something that's 10 stories. You, the municipality, want me to build something that's 7 stories. Now we negotiate for those additional 3 stories. So you can come back to me and say, how about community benefit? What can you build a park? Can you? So a lot of these things could be used nefariously, I guess you could say, right? Like it leaves a lot up for interpretation. So I think the intent was to streamline that and make it more obvious as to what was allowable and what wasn't. You hear awful things about the guy who, bought $80 million worth of land that was worth nothing at 20%, and then magically the zoning changes and now it's worth much more than that.
Right.
There's all of these sorts of situations where there's an opportunity to make that amount of money. There's the opportunity for corruption, but I think that was the intent of the legislation.
Right on. Yeah, and Joe, just the comments on there, a lot of people saying thank you, of course, Rachel. Joe Condi just mentioning that, it's a big learning curve, thrown at people where they've been planning on going down this one route, and then all of a sudden, we can do something else, but how do we balance this into our current plan and budget and all that sort of stuff?
Right. It's, yeah, I can tell you from my personal experiences, I have been a hobby investor for a long time. And I went to Florida after the crash. I bought houses in Florida that allowed me to stay at home with my kids when they were younger. I started to bring that money back to Canada, and I was thinking, like, how can I make enough money that I can do this as a job? Because there's no cash flow around here. So if I want a cash flow, I need to go to Calgary. I need to go someplace else. And then coach houses were allowed, and it changed everything. It changed all of the numbers. And that's when I went whole hog into this and said, okay, this is something that I can do and make a career out of. So yeah, it's available to you, but it is a learning curve. It's a massive learning curve.
That's and just Joe Condi's commenting on Kingston. Mike Seals commenting on Windsor here, just saying that Joe had a good help with the planning department. Kingston was very helpful on the application and the easements for the property line. And Mike Seal is just commenting that Windsor is very forward thinking with respect to this program. And we can definitely vouch for that. We've seen Windsor and how they're trying to move forward and create a beautiful city there. So excellent.
Windsor has actually done, like, I'm originally from Windsor. So Windsor was one of the first, I think they were in 2020 to allow it. I might be wrong. And Sarah Sipkar is there as well, who is, I'm going to get it wrong, a master's or PhD or something. And she's doing a massive research project about the construction of these coach houses and what they rent for and how it's going to change living in the economy and that sort of thing. So people are looking at this from an academic aspect as well, not just a profit aspect. So it's really interesting. The next 5 years are going to be a time where a lot of change can be made, a lot of profit can be made, and a lot of knowledge can be gained.
Well, I can't believe it, but we kept it at an hour.
I know.
Amazing.
No, it has been fantastic. You certainly not only were very detailed, I think you gave us the meat and potatoes, right? Like now it's up to us to go and do the due diligence, get the proper clarity and answer to our questions, but you were able to, give us that start. This is what it is. This is what it means. We have the freedom now up to the triplex, but there is less restrictions per se if we wanted to take it up to that 9 units versus anything under 10.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I thank you, everybody. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to us. Rachel is extremely busy. However, if you follow us on Facebook, I've done some videos at one of her projects, Club Muskoka there in Muskoka, Ontario, which is coming along amazing, but she might not get back to your messages as quickly as you might like. So give her at least until the new year.
She does need a break, folks.
please, my kids want to see me again.
I'm looking to, and I'm looking at everybody's name on this call, so I'm not going to plug all of our social media links in there. I think you guys follow us enough on Facebook, etc. So thank you very much for the kind words in this chat. Really, really great and lovely of you guys, and have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time we do this.
Thank you,
Thanks
everyone.
all. Bye.
Thank you.